How's it going, y'all? So, in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys my second installment of my team building videos. First off, I want to apologize for the fact that it's been maybe like 2 to 3 weeks since I've shown you part one of this team building guide. I guess I have a lot of content saved up that I'm trying to get through, but I know that you want to post this type of content pretty close to each other. And it's actually going to end up being a pretty long video that I have to split into 2 parts. And even this part's going to end up being like 40 minutes. So I'm going to try to get through it pretty quickly. My friend Random Gaming VGC has also started his own team building guide. And he has his own, unique take on things. So I do suggest, maybe checking out his team building guide as well. We're taking different approaches on it, I would say. But today's topic is really just about countering the usual suspects that you see in the game. Because when you're building a team, something that's actually very important is just being able to deal with the most common things that you're going to see in Pokemon. Whether that's like abilities, moves, or actual Pokemon that everybody uses, you need to build teams that have the ability to deal with these things. And so that's what I want to talk about today. In this part of the video, we're going to talk about countering common abilities and moves, and then I hope that that will segue up to talking about countering certain Pokemon that everybody uses. Because when you understand abilities and moves, you understand why everybody uses certain Pokemon. And I mean, some Pokemon just stats wise are manifestly good. So there's that. But let's get into it. So what did we talk about last time? In my last team building video, if you didn't see it, we really just talked about how do you try to pick 6 Pokemon in the first place. I probably could have talked about that last because that's kind of like the culmination. So like almost after the whole series, going back and watching the first one is going to make more sense. But when you're picking 6 Pokemon, right, you want to not only have like multiple possible leads and multiple possible back options, but you want to have Pokemon that can support each other and help set each other up, whether that's having like Bulldoze self-proc a weakness policy, or having like setting up Psychic Terrain and having Follow Me support. Pokemon that work well together are very good to have, and that creates like a whole synergized front option, or back option if need be. Something that can switch in and also work well with the front option. And then you also want to have Pokemon that can counter each other's weaknesses, right? Like if you have a team with a 2 ground Pokemon, you're gonna know that you're gonna be weak to water, so you need something on your team that can counter water, like a grass Pokemon or an electric Pokemon. And yeah. That's I don't need to go more into it right now. That part of it. And something else that you want to pay attention to is who are you using more or less when you're building a team. Sometimes you build a team of 6 Pokemon and then you find that you're only using 5 of them most of the time, or 4 of them, and that tells you that you might want to think about some extra additions to sub in for those Pokemon you're using less to make the team more well-rounded and diverse, and not like pigeonholed. You also want to be able to have a team that has the ability to counter what your opponent wants to do. So if your team is all offensive and has no way to try to block what your opponent is doing, then there's a really good chance they're going to set up on you and just kind of sweep. And that's going to be, largely related to our topic today, is like, how do you think about countering what your opponent's going to do and the board positioning that they're trying to set up. And lastly, just, be careful using Pokemon with 4 times weaknesses if you don't have a way to mitigate that problem. Because it can be a problem. So let's get into the actual stuff for the day. Firstly, I just want to show the super effective chart. I'm sure there's people out there who are going to benefit from seeing this. A lot of what I talk about, sometimes I think I assume that people know certain things, but in this super effective chart, you can see what types are super effective on what, and then you can see what types are super effective on what. So all these types are super effective on these, and then these types are super effective on all these types. So when you know how this type chart works, it's really easy to keep track of what your moves are going to do without being, kind of coddled the way that the game coddles us now, and pretty much just tells you when you're going to be super effective. You used to have to know yourself. So the first thing that I want to talk about, I'm not going to be like reading straight off of the things, because I know what I want to say, but I'm going to be talking like, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using something, and then how do you counter something. So the first thing I think that really needs to be talked about is just Dynamax in the first place. The fact that Dynamax is actually in the game now has changed the way that Pokemon is played so much that you have to think about it, right? Not only does having a Dynamax Pokemon on the field make that Pokemon 2 times bulkier, but it gets access to a lot more powerful moves, and it also has the ability to do things like raising stats, or like, setting up psychic terrain, or, terrains and weathers. And so in previous games, basically just stat boosts were way less core to the game, I guess I would say. But now that you have Dynamax, you have such easy access to changing people's stats that the game very much so can center around like lowering your opponent's attack, raising your defense, raising your attack, and all those sorts of things, and using Dynamax to set up terrains in order to like counter your opponent's terrains or counter their weather and things like that. Disadvantages of Dynamax are that if you use it at the wrong time, you can kind of waste your Dynamax. So there's something to be considered about like whether a late game or an early game Dynamax is going to benefit you in certain situations, but it doesn't always matter. It's more about like knowing your team and knowing what you need to do. And of course, just like I said, Dynamax has vastly changed the way the game plays, so that's, can be seen as a plus or a minus in ways. How do you counter Dynamax? So the counters is something I will need to, benefit from reading off the screen. Counters, when somebody Dynamaxes, I often just think about stalling their Dynamax out if I haven't Dynamaxed yet. So I like protect, I try to like switch in to make them not do that much damage if possible, and really just like make it so that they don't get a lot out of their Dynamax. You might like charm their Dynamax Pokemon if you're faster to lower its attack and neutralize it. You might Dynamax your own Pokemon and like max Flutterby to lower its special attack if it's highly special attack heavy. You might nuzzle their Dynamax Pokemon or burn it to effectively like neuter how well it's going to perform. And so there's a lot of ways that you can counter Dynamax, but the best thing is really just like either stalling it out, quickly getting rid of the Dynamax Pokemon, or if you Dynamax, you can actually just completely avoid their Dynamax, take out, if need be. Sometimes you want to target their Dynamax, right? But like sometimes with your Dynamax Pokemon, you can take out all their other Pokemon, and then just like, yeah, they Dynamaxed, but like your Dynamax Pokemon completely destroyed their whole, like everything else they have. So, there's definitely ways to counter Dynamax. Next is, oh my god, this video is going to be long. Next is Fake Out. So, Fake Out is something that you really need to be considerate of in the game, because Fake Out essentially just stops someone from doing anything for a turn. and it doesn't work on Dynamax Pokemon, so you have to be aware of that. But if you can fake out the correct person, you can stop them from setting up their side of the field with like tailwinds, taunts, whatever, whatever they want to do, even just like a powerful move, you have the chance to stop. And so you can fake out somebody and then try to like get rid of them before they even get the chance to do something, or it'll buy you a little bit of time to set up what you're trying to do, whether you want to go for a trick room or, whatever has it. Fake out can be really useful, and Raichu is one of the fastest fake out users, so that's really good. Disadvantage is, fake out does take a move space, so on some Pokemon, you're going to have to lose a crucial move in order to use fake out. And when you use fake out, you're also, you're not using another move that turn, which can at times bite you in the butt, and it can leave your Pokemon vulnerable, where you use fake out and then they just like one-shot your Pokemon. So, I mean, it does happen, but there's also ways to counter someone else's fake out if they use fake out. You can protect, protect is amazing. Your Dynamax, if you Dynamax, it's not going to work. They're fake out. They'll get a little chip. Ghost Pokemon, for the most part, are really good against fake out, because unless your opponent has the Scrappy ability, which normal Pokemon can hit ghosts, then a ghost Pokemon can set up on the field and not have to worry about fake out. I do think that that's what makes Kangaskhan a really good Pokemon, however, though, is that like if you need to counter a ghost Pokemon, you can use fake out Kangaskhan, or like fake out Scrafty with Scrappy, and you can, counter a Dragapult or a Spectrier or something. You can also counter fake out with things like Psychic Terrain, which block priority moves. There is a move called Quick Guard, which blocks priority moves from your opponent. And there's also Queenly Majesty, which is an ability that Serena has, right? Serena, that stops your opponent from being able to use priority moves. So there is ways to counter fake out, but all in all, you want a really fast fake out user. If you want to be the fastest fake out user on the field, if your opponent has fake out as well. Then, protect is just really important, honestly. If you want to, I would say, have at least like half of your Pokemon have protect sometimes. The advantage of protect is just that, you can make your opponent waste their turns if they target into it, and you can also conserve your Pokemon. So in a 2v1, like you have 2 people left and your opponent has 1 person left, but you might still be in like a kind of rough position. If you can protect the person they're going to target and then attack them with your other person, you're going to put them in an even worse position in the next turn, so that, now they have to decide again who they're going to target, but you've done damage, and it might not even matter who they target next turn because you like can take them out with another hit. So protecting in a late game can also save you in like a 2v1 situation, but protecting can, stall your opponent's Dynamax out. It can stop them from, doing damage to you and give you the chance to knock them out. But, there can be disadvantages, of course. Protect can stop you from doing anything for a turn, when if they don't target your protect because they read it, then you would have gotten more out of actually doing something that turn, right? So there's that. Like, it can be predicted, and that's a problem. Also, a Pokemon with a 4x weakness can also still get one shot through protect sometimes. So you've got to be, like, prepared for that. And, yeah. But there are counters to protect. Unseen Fist is an ability that Urshifu has that allows it to hit through protect, and Gmax, Urshifu's, Gmax whatever, Rapid Strike or Gmax Wicked Blow, can hit through protect as well, which is important. But there are moves that can hit through protect: Phantom Force, Feint, Coaching actually works through Protect, if I remember correctly, as a supportive move. And, you can just try to predict your opponent's Protect. So there's that. Prankster. Prankster is something that you're going to see used in the game quite a lot that you need to be ready to counter. And, countering things is the theme for this video, right? Your team needs to be able to counter the most used things in the game. So the advantages of Prankster are, when you're using it, is that you basically have the ability to auto-use status moves if you didn't know what Prankster does. So Prankster, any move that's not an actual attacking move, gets +1 priority. Light Screen, Will-O-Wisp, Thunder Wave, any move that doesn't do damage has +1 priority for a Prankster Pokemon. So it's a great way to stop your opponent from doing what they want to do, because you can, fire off a Will-O-Wisp right away and burn their attacker and lower its ability to do damage. You can taunt your opponent and stop them from being able to use their own non-attacking moves, like setting up Trick Room. Disadvantages are that Prankster does not always work. Prankster doesn't work on dark Pokemon, and it also doesn't work on your opponent's side of the field in psychic terrain. However, if your opponent's Pokemon is airborne, meaning it's like a flying Pokemon or has Levitate, then it's not affected by terrain. So you can still use a Prankster Pokemon on a flying or a Levitate Pokemon in psychic terrain. But other than that, in psychic terrain, you can only target your own side of the field with Prankster and use, set up your own swag or own tempo or something like that. But in general, you want to be the fastest Prankster user on the field. If you're not the fastest Prankster user, then the other Prankster user has the chance to taunt you and stop you from being the one who, can set up your side of the field. So that's why I use Whimsicott a lot. Whimsicott is the fastest Prankster user in the game, if I remember correctly, unless your opponent is using what's it called? The one that raises your speed, Choice Scarf. If your opponent is really gutsy and they have a Choice Scarf Prankster Pokemon, they can be faster than Whimsicott. But Whimsicott is the fastest Prankster user, so I use it with max speed, speed nature, and that gives you the chance to taunt your opponent's Prankster user unless it's a Grimmsnarl or a, Sableye, because those are dark Pokemon and you can't use your own Prankster on them to taunt them. But, Whimsicott can taunt opposing Whimsicotts if they're slower or they win the speed tie and stop them from using Tailwind or Taunt on you. You can taunt an opposing Tornadus, but, you can also, stop Taunt with things like Mental Herb as well. If your opponent has Prankster, you can try to fake out their Prankster user and one-shot it or, taunt it. So, you can try to neutralize their Prankster user. You can set up your own psychic terrain, or you can just have your own dark Pokemon. So those are ways that you can counter Prankster and, advantages and disadvantages. That leads us into Taunt in general, though. So, Taunt is useful because it stops your opponent from being able to use non-attacking moves. So, Prankster is, it allows your non-attacking moves to have priority. Taunt stops your opponent from actually being able to use non-attacking moves. So it's really great to have Taunt. Taunt is even better, honestly, sometimes on a Pokemon without Prankster, because then you can actually taunt dark Pokemon and, stop a dark Pokemon from being able to use their Prankster ability, because dark Pokemon are some of the best Pranksters, like Grimmsnarl and Sableye, just because they, can't be Prankstered themselves. But Taunt is really great for stopping your opponent from, being able to paralyze you, being able to set up their own side of the field, being able to will-o-wisp you, being able to set up Trick Room. Like, Taunt is used in quite a lot of situations. And if your opponent sets up Psychic Terrain to stop you from taunting them, you can, bring out your own terrain in the back and reset their terrain and then have the chance to taunt them. So there's that. And if you need to counter a taunt, you can try to fake it out and taunt them. You can try to fake it out and one-shot them. Mental Herb, blocks taunt, even though I'm not actually going to be talking about items that much in this video. And, apologies that I'm going to be talking kind of quick, but, I have a lot to talk about. Oblivious is a good way to counter Taunt because Oblivious Pokemon can't actually be taunted, and neither can Magic Bounce Pokemon. A Pokemon like, I think, Espeon and Hatterene are the only Pokemon I can think of off the top of my head that have Magic Bounce, but when your opponent uses a non-attacking move on them, it gets redirected back at them. So I've used Hatterene, had someone taunt Hatterene, and then Hatterene takes their taunt and then taunts them, which is fun. But Oblivious, I think, is also a really good way to stop taunt because, Slowbro Oblivious with Trick Room, for example, can't be taunted, and that adds it to its, increases its ability to set up your side of the field. But having your own taunt allows you to stop them from setting up what they want to do, right? Which, is important. You want to not only be able to set up your side of the field, but block your opponent from setting up what they want to do in Pokemon. That leads us into Trick Room. Trick Room is something you will be able to spot on an opposing team if you see that they have really slow Pokemon, or that they have certain Pokemon that have the move Trick Room. You want to get used to who can use Trick Room, like Mimikyu, Slowbro, Whimsicott can even get it, Stakataka is a common Trick Room user, Indeedee Male, if you see Indeedee Male, it gets Trick Room, Chandelure. So you just get used to what has Trick Room, definitely. The advantage of Trick Room is that it reverses the board speed. So, in Pokemon, being the first one to move is so important because it allows you to do the damage first, and you can actually, remove your opponent's Pokemon before they get to do anything, or, set up your side of the field before them and, paralyze them, disrupt them, charm them, Eerie Impulse them. When you're faster, you're the one who disrupts the field first, and that can be very important. In Trick Room, the slowest Pokemon is first. So your slow Pokemon has the chance to sweep fast Pokemon instead of fast Pokemon sweeping slow Pokemon. And it's really just a matter of actually being able to set up the Trick Room. You don't always, get to set up the Trick Room, and, Trick Room is also stallable. So don't think that you're going to win just because you set up Trick Room. But the advantage of Trick Room is that Pokemon is a stats-based game, right? And so not only are having the Pokemon with higher stats, manifestly just better, like pseudo-legendaries and things up with 500 to 600 base stats, but a slow Pokemon, because they're slow, has less of their base stat points invested in speed and can have their points invested elsewhere, it makes them what I would call a tank, basically. So a slow Pokemon often has higher defense whilst not having to sacrifice HP or attack. So they can have really high HP, really high attack, and really high defense, and then they're just slow. But if you set up Trick Room, then they're everything, basically, and they're really good Pokemon. So, you can really benefit from setting up Trick Room for something like, I don't know, Stakataka, Mudsdale, Torkoal, Iron Ball Kyogre. But there are ways to counter Trick Room, of course, taunting your opposing Pokemon opponent, You can stall out their Trick Room with Protects and things like that. You can bring your own slow Pokemon as a threat. So just throwing a slow Pokemon on your own team that is good against other slow Pokemon can be really important. Like Gigalith is a really good example because Torkoal and Glastrier are very common slow Pokemon that are used. So Gigalith, just having a Gigalith on your team makes your opponent not want to use Trick Room as much. Or threatens their own Trick Room, because if they do it, you can punish it by having your own Pokemon that's good in Trick Room. And, yeah, if you just are good in Trick Room yourself, that's a good way to counter their Trick Room, having, your own Trick Room option. On some teams, it's really good to have a fast and a slow option in general. And sometimes you can actually have a Pokemon like Chandelure who has Trick Room and Imprison. And when you use Imprison, you stop your opponent from being able to use moves that you have. So by using Imprison and Trick Room, having Trick Room on your Pokemon, you don't let them set up Trick Room, which can be important. So next is just the idea of hyper fast and speed control. Since Trick Room is about, countering speed, it does bring up the idea that speed is really the name of the game, right? Like, when you're faster than your opponent, you have the chance to set up first and counter first, or knock your opposing people out first before they even get to do anything, which I kind of said on the last slide. So you do benefit pretty greatly from being hyper fast or having speed control. The disbenefit is that, going back to this whole base stat idea, your Pokemon are going to often be more frail when they're fast. So fast Pokemon are often have lower defense, but are really, really strong. And if they're not really strong, then they're gonna have higher defense and just be fast, but kind of weak, I guess. So being fast is great, but it does often come with being a little bit more frail. And there are ways to counter your opponent being fast, like setting up Trick Room, setting up Tailwind so that you're faster than your opponent. But when your opponent is fast, they can set up Tailwind before you too, which is one of the things you need to look out for. But setting up your own Tailwind allows you to be faster than people. If you can nuzzle your opponent, you half their speed. So nuzzling your opponent is a great way to moderate their ability to be faster than you. Scary Face halves their speed as well. So if you have a Prankster Scary Face user like Grimmsnarl, it's a great way to deal with things. And then there's moves like Electro Web, Icy Wind, and Max Airstream, where Electro Web and Icy Wind are attack the whole opponent side of the field moves and lower their speed one stage. So, Electro Web and Icy Wind are really important as speed control possibilities, but there's also, you can use your own Max Airstream or Max Strike, and you can, raise your speed or lower their speed. So, it is important to think about speed tiers and who's going to be faster, who's going to get to set up first. But if you have a way to moderate speed tiers, it's really good. Because I have, in certain instances, been slower than something, and then been okay, well, if I nuzzle them with Raichu, the person that I'm worried about being slower is going to be faster. And so, you nuzzle, lower them down to being slower than your person that you want to one-shot them with, and then you one-shot them, and then you don't have to worry about it, right? So, having a way to change speed tiers is really important, honestly, in Pokemon. If you don't know stat boosts and how stat boosts work, I suggest looking at Cerebi. And Cerebi has great information, serebii.net. It's a great website for looking up all sorts of game mechanics. Go to their game mechanics page, basically, from the right-hand column, or left-hand column, sorry, left-hand column. And so, yeah, here's just a quick look at how stat changes work if you do want to think about stat changes, because stat changes are going to be very important in the game. When we're thinking about accuracy, accuracy and evasion work a little bit differently. One accuracy boost goes up like 1/3 every time, whereas stat boosts go up 1.5 every stat boost, or go down the equivalent of 1.5. So when you are, changing stats, that's definitely something you want to be aware of. If you can -2 somebody's speed, you're basically halving it. But if you are doing things as well, like raising your defense, you want to be aware of how much defense are you going to get to by giving yourself that 1.5 boost by max steel spike or whatever. So, it's being aware of stat boosts is definitely really important. And if you didn't know how stat boosts work, I definitely, suggest being aware of that. Like, you can only go +6 on stats, and the effect that does essentially is puts you up to +4 in the end of the day. So you can go ×4 on your stats if you really try, but it takes a lot of setting up. And there are ways to counter stat boosts. Clear Smog is an attacking move that takes away your opponent's stat boosts and can be really good on not just Amoonguss, but on Torkoal, it can really catch your opponent off guard. So if you're using Assault Vest Torkoal, you might want like Eruption, Heat Wave, Clear Smog, and Solar Beam, or like Burning Jealousy or something like that. And the Clear Smog can actually really come in clutch against like a Moltres or a Spectrier, etc., Glastrier, whatever. And there are abilities that, of course, also allow you to not be able to have your stats lowered, like Clear Body, Full Metal Body, which is a legendary one, and White Smoke. You'll see Clear Body being used quite a lot on Metagross. And so if you see someone using Metagross and Spectrier next to each other, for example, they probably have weakness policy Metagross, and they will, set off their weakness policy with Bulldoze and lower everyone's speed on your side of the field. Doesn't lower Metagross's speed because it has Clear Body, so it can't lower its speed. And then after they set off their own weakness policy, you can't lower their stats unless you have a Pokemon with Mold Breaker, which allows you to use moves regardless of your opponent's ability, or you have a Pokemon with Neutralizing Gas, which is just Wheezing. So, if you have Neutralizing Gas, you can do that, or if you can suppress their ability somehow, like you can get around Clear Body. But Clear Body is a really good ability, basically, to have on one of your Pokemon if you want, because it can stop you from... It stops your opponent from being able to stop you from getting stat boosts unless they like burn you or paralyze you or something. Really quickly, I just want to show you some really good stat boosting moves, which you can also find on Cerebi. I'm, not going to go over this too much right now. Maybe I'll go over it in my next video. But, it's all right here if you want to pause it and look at it, basically. So, Iron Defense and Barrier are really good, defense moves. Cotton Guard is a good defense move. It's a defense stat raising move. And of course, there are things that lower stats, but that's on the next slide. Bell Stinger is a great attack raising move. Power Up Punch, Flame Charge, Charge Beam are stat raising moves. Decorate, Belly Drum, Calm Mind, and Bulk Up. Calm Mind is like for special attack and special defense, whereas Bulk Up is for attack and defense. Cosmic Power and Stockpile raise defense and special defense +1, so they can be really useful. Coaching is like Bulk Up, but it raises someone else's stats instead of your stats. So you can have a coaching Pokemon raise your allies' attack and defense instead of having to waste a turn using Bulk Up to raise your own attack and defense. Belly Drum is really good when paired with something like a Berry or Recycle, because, you know, you can max your attack out, and then you can, you know, not have to worry about halving your health, basically. So, stat lowering moves, of course, are, you know, stat lowering moves are your counter moves, whereas stat boosting moves are your setup moves, right? So, there's really good stat lowering moves, like speed lowering moves, Electroweb, Icy Wind, Bulldoze, special attack lowering moves like Struggle Bug, Snarl, Skitter Smack. Parting Shot is a move that is like U-turn but lowers your opponent's attack and special attack one stage. Charm and Feather Dance and Baby Doll Eyes are attack moderating moves, so they allow you to lower your opponent's attack. So does Breaking Swipe, Lunge, and Drop Kick, but Breaking Swipe, Lunge, and Drop Kick actually do damage, whereas Charm, Feather Dance, and Baby Doll Eyes do not. Strength Sap is a, you know, really good move, honestly, for, like, let's see, Jellicent. And I can't quite think of another one besides Jellicent right now that's really good with Strength Sap. But if you want to look up the move, feel free. It lowers your opponent's attack and heals you the amount that their attack stat is. So it's a very good move, especially if there's a Prankster Pokemon that gets Strength Sap. Tickle lowers your opponent's defense, if I remember correctly, and Fire Lash, Grab Apple, and Thunderous Kick are attacking moves that lower your opponent's defense. There are moves that lower your opponent's special defense as well. I just couldn't think of many of them, like ones that guarantee lowered special defense. I couldn't think of, like Flash Cannon has a possibility of lowering special defense. Moonblast has a possibility of lowering special attack, but those are like possibility ones instead of like guarantee ones, I suppose. But, you know, being able to lower your opponent's stats is very important, because in the case of something like Electroweb, you know, it's a speed moderating move. So when you have a Pokemon like Regieleki and you're the fastest Pokemon on the field and you can lower your opponent's speed, it lets you get ready to set up the person next to Regieleki. It makes Regieleki not only a good offensive Pokemon, but a good supporter, which, you know, a Pokemon that can be offensive and support is really good. Feeny with Calm Mind, just because it's also in the picture, is amazing just because it's so bulky. Weather is something that, sorry that I'm going through this kind of quickly, but I do have a lot to go through. And I think I'm like a little over halfway through it. Weather is something that you're going to see quite a lot being used in Pokemon. Weather is really good just because it allows you to have chip damage on your opponent in certain instances with Sandstorm or Hailstorm. And it also, in the other instances, like Rain and Sun, because those are the four weathers, gives you move type support. So when you set up a weather, you can, chip away at your opponent. Sandstorm raises rock Pokemon's special defense one stage, which is really important. But when you have Rain and Sun set up, not only in the Rain is water moves power increased by 1.5, but it lowers fire moves power by 1.5, and vice versa in the Sun. In the Sun, fire is increased 1.5 and water is decreased 1.5. So when you have weather set up, it can just be a great way to moderate your opponent's damage output from their fire or water onto your people that are weak against that, and to also give you the ability to do more damage with your fire or water moves. So there's that. The disbenefit is that sometimes weathers can anti-synergize with certain Pokemon. For example, if you have Sun set up your water Pokemon are not going to perform as well, which can be a problem. But in your own weather, you can also benefit your Pokemon with certain abilities like Swift Swim or Slush Rush, which, make your Pokemon 2 times faster in water or ice, or, there's ones for every type of weather, basically. Chlorophyll, Sand Rush, whatever it's called. And then there's things like, Ice Body, which like heals in the hail and things like that. And there are counters to weather, if your opponent sets up a weather and you want to stop them from doing that, just have your own weather. Having your own Pokemon that has an ability like Drought, Sandstream, whatever it is, can be really important for countering your opponent's weather. But just having Gmax moves that can counter weather is also going to be useful. So, rock, water, fire, and ice moves, when they're Gmaxed, allow you to reset the weather themselves. So a Gmax Pokemon, or Dmax, whatever you want to call it, sorry, Dynamax. A Dynamax Pokemon is going to be able to reset the weather as well, which can be really important for blocking your opponent's weather. Terrains are kind of like the other side of the coin to weather. Terrains allow you to set up your side of the field to get ready to do certain things and potentially block your opponent from doing things that they want to do. So there is on like Cerebi.com again, for example, if you want to look at Cerebi.com, you can see like what the effect of certain like sunlights and certain terrains are, but I'm also going to, I think, show that on the next slide. So when you have certain terrains set up, you can activate certain moves or synergies or anti-synergies that can be really important. So with the introduction of the Isle of Armor, there are moves like Grassy Glide and Expanding Force, which in terrains have certain new effects added to them, like doubling damage and attacking the whole field, priority, and things like that. So when you set up Grassy Terrain, or Psychic Terrain, Electric Terrain, or Fairy Terrain, you have the ability to get your side of the field ready to use certain moves that are benefited by that terrain. And certain terrains also benefit certain move types, like on Grassy Terrain, grass moves in general just like do a little bit more. Disadvantages are that you can have anti-synergies come up with terrains because the terrains have their own effects. Just like weather, they can make it worse to have certain things. So like they make it worse for your opponent to have certain things, like in Psychic Terrain, priority moves don't work, so your opponent can't use priority moves, but you can't use priority moves on your opponent either. So you need to be aware of things like that. Grassy Terrain lowers the damage output of things like Earthquake and Magnitude. So if you have a move like Earthquake, you will disbenefit from your own Grassy Terrain. So there's things like that. And so yeah, like you want to be aware of what the terrains do. You want to know that like Psychic Terrain blocks priority. Fairy Terrain blocks your block status conditions, so you can't be burned or anything like that. And being able to set up Fairy Terrain is really good for like if you predict that you're about to get burned or something like that. But your airborne Pokemon will not benefit from these terrains, and on the reverse side, your opponent's Pokemon that are airborne will not benefit from these terrains, meaning that if you want to hurt them, you can bypass terrain effects as well. So counters to terrains, just having your own terrains. being able to take advantage of their terrains. So like sometimes their terrain is actually going to benefit you. But if you don't have your own terrain, you can Gmax, and hopefully you have a move that can set up your own terrain to counter their terrain, like an electric move, a fairy move, a grass move, or a psychic move, because in Gmax they will set up those terrains for you if you don't have a, you know, if you don't have a Gmax move that overwrites it, basically. The effect of each terrain can be, understood pretty straightforward if you don't know the effect of each terrain. I don't want to go over it too in detail right now. I want to more like put it here and just let you actually like have the chance to look at it, because I do know that this video is probably already getting close to like 30 minutes or even over 30 minutes. But yes, like certain moves get boosts in like electric terrain, grassy terrain, things like that. And so do like sometimes just the type in general. And you can also like counter your opponent's moves as well, like make their moves do less in certain terrains. But yeah, like just take a moment to like look over this if you want and get used to like just remember like what they do so that you don't try to like fake out your opponent in psychic terrain or something. Screens are something that you're definitely gonna see and that you need to be ready for. The benefit of screens like light screen and what's the other one called? Sorry, I can't think of it. It's not called barrier, reflect. Light screen and reflect. Light screen halves the damage that you take from special attacks, and reflect halves the damage you take from regular attacks. So they can be really important for mitigating the amount of damage that you're going to take, but it also can allow your opponent to mitigate the damage that they're going to take. And so you need to be ready for screens for sure, and like stat boosts are a good way to mitigate like dealing with screens, because when you get stat boosts, it's kind of like their screens don't exist. But you can also have moves that can take their screens away, like Brick Break and Psychic Fangs will remove the screens on your opponent's side of the field. You can also try to stall your opponent's screens out. You can have your own screens. And an item that is really good to use with screens if you have your own screens is Light Clay, because it makes the screens last 2 times as long. But sometimes your thing that has sets up the screens doesn't always want to have Light Clay. So there is that. Like, I use Weakness Policy Lapras sometimes, and like I don't use Light Clay with that, because like you set up your Aurora Veil and then you don't take a lot of damage, and you set, like with the Weakness Policy proc, you're just straight ouch here. So yeah, you want to be aware of screens, and the disadvantage of screens is just that obviously it doesn't always work. You do have to like set it up, so in the time that it takes to set it up, you can get countered, or you can have someone get taken out. But screens are very something you need to be aware of. Follow me. Follow me is something that you're gonna come in contact with quite a bit, or that you will benefit from having. Follow me basically just redirects away from a Pokemon to another Pokemon. So in doubles, which this is a lot of what I do is talking about doubles, right? Follow me is going to allow someone to take damage away from somebody and allow another Pokemon to last longer and to set up or to knock out the opposing Pokemon. The problem with Follow Me can be that it's a little predictable. So there's only so many Pokemon in the game that get Follow Me, like the Togekiss line, the Indeedee line, the Clefairy line. And then there's Rage Powder too. Like Rage Powder and Follow Me are the same thing. Amoonguss gets Rage Powder. Volcarona gets Rage Powder. But Rage Powder doesn't work on grass Pokemon, which is good to know. So, I mean, yeah, Follow Me can be predictable. And like if you fake out a follow me user, you can just one-shot it and get rid of it. And you know, follow me also takes a turn, so it can be thought of as wasting a turn. The one person who is the best with follow me is Indeedee, because it gets psychic terrain, and so you can't fake out Indeedee when it has the psychic terrain up. So it's free to go for follow me. It often runs sash, so you can't one-shot it, and it basically allows your other Pokemon on the field to be able to set up if your opponent can't counter it. Ways to counter follow me are having spread damage. So if you have moves that can attack your whole opponent's side of the field, then follow me just doesn't really matter. If you can taunt their follow me user, that's a good way to deal with it. If you can just get rid of their follow me user, that's a good way to deal with it. And then there are moves and abilities that have the ability to not be redirected. So if you have a Pokemon with Stalwart, which is Duraludon, or Propeller Tail, which is Barraskewda, they can avoid redirection. So they have an inherent benefit in that. But also Inteleon's move Snipe Shot does not have it can't be redirected. So, you know, there's moves that can get around it, but in general, you want to like just get rid of or neutralize the person with follow me, or use follow me to set up your own Pokemon. Perish Trap, yes, you will come into contact with Perish Trap, so, you know who gets Perish Trap and be ready for it. Politoed gets Perish Trap. Lapras gets Perish Trap, Gothitelle gets Perish Trap, Primarina I think gets Perish Trap. The advantage of using Perish Trap on your own side of the field is that what Perish Trap allows you to do is when your opponent only has 2 Pokemon left, if you have more than 2 Pokemon left, you can use it, and it sets a 3-turn timer on the field, which says if they can't get rid of everyone that you have in 3 turns, then they will faint. So when you can whittle your opponent down to 2 people and have 3 people left, you set up Perish Trap, start doing switch out shenanigans or protect shenanigans, and they just pretty much auto lose. The disbenefit is that in a 2v2 scenario, the slowest Pokemon on the field wins the Perish Trap. So if you try to use Perish Trap in a 2v2 and you're not the slowest Pokemon on the field, you will lose. So you need to be aware of that. Setting up Perish Trap doesn't always work, and you don't always get the chance to set up Perish Trap, and you don't want to over focus on Perish Trap. So if you have a team that completely revolves around Perish Trap, you can disbenefit from that because you want to be able to not use Perish Trap and still be okay. There are ways to counter Perish Trap, of course. You know, if you see that they have Perish Trap, you might fake them out and try to take them out right away. Fake out and take out, as you might say. Or you might just whittle them down quicker than they whittle you down, so that they don't have the chance to use their Perish Trap. Because, you know, if they have 2 people and you have 3 people left, they're not going to want to use their Perish Trap, right? Whereas if you have 3 people and they have 2 people, you might get the chance to actually use your Perish Trap. Or even better, you might have 4 people and they have 2 people, right? Sleeps, burns, and paras, you know, being able to deal out status conditions is very important in the game. And I would say, honestly, like burning and sleeping and paralyzing are the most prevalent status conditions that you're going to see in the game. The thing that they're great for is that they help you disrupt your opponent's side of the field, which is really important. So if you're trying to, you know, if your opponent has a lot of attack, you can burn them in half their attack. If your opponent is really fast, you can paralyze them and you can half their speed. Sleep is one of the most annoying things in the game because it just straight up stops your opponent from doing anything, or stops you from doing anything. and, allows you to just straight sweep or get swept. So, when you think about the importance of disrupting the field and being able to set up on your opponent, dealing out status conditions is very important, as well as avoiding status conditions. And the one disadvantage of status conditions is anti-synergy, in the sense that some status conditions actually last the whole game, and you don't always want that. So if you burn your opponent, you're not going to be able to put them to sleep later in the game if they're burned the whole game. And that might cost you actually at certain times. So like I have accidentally like burned my opponent with Heat Wave, and then I can't put them to sleep, and that's like really bad for me, There are ways to counter status conditions, though, of course, like Misty Terrain, Aromatherapy, and Safeguard. Safeguard it basically just makes your side of the field not be able to get hit by status conditions. Here's just a list of good supportive moves that I just wanted to give you guys. Just to again, you might just want to pause and look at this, and I'm not going to necessarily go over what these all do in depth, but Will-O-Wisp is really good. It burns your opponent. Nuzzle and Thunderwave paralyze your opponent. Fake Out, we already went over Fake Out, Protect and Detect. Wide Guard allows your opponent can't use attack all your whole side of the field moves. Quick Guard, stops priority moves. Helping Hand is really important because it supports your side of the field with making your other Pokemon do 50% more damage, if I'm correct. And it's also moves faster than Fake Out. So if you're afraid of getting faked out, you on your Helping Hand user, you can use Helping Hand, and you'll move before their Fake Out still. Ally Switch is really annoying, and is a great support move. If you have Slowbro and Wigglytuff on the field together, for example, they are really good against what each other are bad against. So if you use Ally Switch, you will pretty much mitigate what your opponent is trying to do if they don't call it and they're trying to use super effective moves. Trick Room and Tailwind, obviously we talked about, are really good support moves for mitigating speed control. Coaching and Decorate are good for giving stat boosts, and then Sleep Powder and Spore and things of that nature are really good for, setting up, status conditions as well. Intimidate. Intimidate is something that you're going to come across quite a lot. Intimidate is used for lowering your opponent's attack one stage. So if your opponent has the ability Intimidate, you need to be cautious of bringing out your physical attackers, but you can also use a Pokemon with Intimidate on your side of the field to punish someone who has a lot of physical attackers on their team. So, that can be good. If you have an Intimidate user, it benefits very heavily from being switched out and switched back in a lot to lower their attack even more. So, an Intimidate user with Parting Shot or U-Turn can be really good. The disbenefits is that there are ways to counter it, having a special attack user or punishing their Intimidate by having something like Defiant and Competitive, which is what we're going to talk about next. So Defiant and Competitive are really good abilities because what they basically do is they raise your attack or special attack +2 whenever one of your stats is lowered. So if somebody has Intimidate and you have a Defiant or Competitive user, you're going to punish them because they're just going to set off your attack raising when they try to lower your attack. So Defiant, your attack goes up +2 when your stats are lowered, and the Competitive, your special attack goes up +2 when your stats are lowered. These can also be really good to have on your side of the field, because if you have a Defiant or a Competitive user, your opponent is not going to want to lower your stats with their Dynamax, because if they want to use like Max Phantasm, yeah, they're going to lower your defense one stage, but they're going to set off your competitive boost and it's going to punish them. So just having Defiant and competitive is a great way to make your opponent not want to do certain things, to limit their Dynamax moves, them wanting to use Intimidate, them wanting to use Electro Web, things like that. So it's really good for stopping your opponent from disrupting your side of the field. It doesn't really have that many disadvantages to using your own Defiant and competitive users. The one disadvantage I would say is that if you're using Defiant or competitive, then you are not using the other ability that your Pokemon has. Like, Thunderous with Prankster can be really good, and so can, Defiant Thunderous, and it's all just a matter of what you want. But, if you're using Defiant, you're not using Prankster, right? Counters to Defiant competitive, fake out and one-shot the boy, don't set it off, and, the good thing is it can't be self-procced. So your opponent can't set off their own Defiant boost or competitive boost, which is really nice. Getting towards the end of our list here, so this is, probably 50 minutes in or whatever, but, it's important stuff. Something you're going to come across is, Beast boosts, Moxie boosts, Chilling Neigh, Grim Neigh, whatever. And these are very threatening abilities that your opponent can have that you need to be wary of, or that you can use to threaten your opponent. So the effect of Beast Boost or Moxie, Grim Neigh, whatever, is that you get a stat boost every time you knock out a Pokemon. With Beast Boost, your highest stat gets the boost. With Moxie, Grim Neigh, Chilling Neigh, Soul Heart, whatever, it's an attack or a special attack boost every time you knock somebody out. But with Beast Boost, it's just your highest stat. So when you have a Pokemon with Beast Boost, Moxie, whatever, you benefit very heavily from knocking Pokemon out with that Pokemon, getting stat boosts, and becoming even more deadly, basically. Like, you knock someone out, you raise your own attack, you raise the chance that you're going to knock someone out again and raise your own attack again, and like it basically is like a snowball effect. I have also used Celesteela, however, with like special defense being its highest stat, and even though it doesn't have Max Quake, if it knocks something out, it gets a special defense boost, and so it can go like potentially can go +3 special defense and +3 defense by getting off 3 max steel spikes and knocking out 3 Pokemon, and can be really deadly. Doesn't have a lot of disadvantages except for the same disadvantages as using Defiant and competitive. Like if you're using it like a Beast Boost or a Moxie. If you're using Moxie, you're not using Intimidate or something, basically, because Moxie's really the only one that's like not unilateral, like not as you only have this ability and no other abilities. So yeah, like Moxie has other options, as opposed to Beast Boost and Grim Neigh and stuff like that. There are ways to counter Beast Boosts and things like that. My way to counter them is to just not let them get knockouts, right? To like stall their Dynamax if they try to Dynamax with it. To like, protect against them, or to take them out as quickly as possible if need be. Because you really want to stop a person with Beast Boost, Moxie, Neigh, from being able to set itself up, because it can become unstoppable if unchecked. Honorable mentions, I actually already mentioned Clear Body, so I don't need to mention that. Justified can be really annoying to go against, because if your opponent has Beat Up, they can use Beat Up Whimsicott or Beat Up Dragapult to Justified raises your attack or your opponent's attack one stage if they get hit with a dark move. So if they use Beat Up on their own Justified Pokemon, they can get theirself to +4 attack in one turn and become unstoppable. So, if your opponent has Justified, you want to fake them out and try to one-shot their Justified user. If it's a Dragapult, you're going to need Scrappy Kangaskhan or something, right? But if it is a Whimsicott, you're just going to want to fake it out. And some people actually are using Protect Whimsicott simply because of that ability to fake it out, which is annoying. So, the final takeaways. Sorry that was there was a lot to think about there. But that's Pokemon, honestly. That's the takeaway, is that's Pokemon. And that in Pokemon, you are going to encounter your opponent trying to set up their side of the field and stop you from setting up your side of the field, disrupting your side of the field. And there's so many different ways to do that, whether it's with Fake Out, Protect, Terrain, Weather Control, Intimidate, having physical and special attack options. There's so many different things that you need to be aware of in Pokemon that are not just hyper offensive, watch me try to do as much damage as possible, and you need to be able to counter what your opponent is going to do, and possibly be able to set up your side of the field if you feel like you need to. And if you have a team that just straight up can't counter certain things, you're going to lose. And that's the point of this video, is that all these things that we just went over are things that you absolutely need to be able to think about in Pokemon and have a way to deal with. And if you just don't have a way to deal with some of these things, like, yeah, you can get away with not being able to deal with one or two of these things at certain times. But, like, if you are just completely susceptible to Fake Out, completely susceptible to Trick Room, and have no way to counter it, completely susceptible to Taunt, you're going to be highly disbenefited. And so not only when you're building a team do you want your team to be able to counter these things that we just went over when you look at your team, but think about utilizing these things, because these are the things that you are going to also highly benefit from. I think that's all that I want to say. Yeah, you just, like, in general, you want your team to be able to consider and deal with all the things that we just talked about. And, you want to have protects. Like, if you don't have the ability to protect, you will give your opponent the free chance to set up in a lot of instances. So, be ready to protect, be ready to have options, and be ready to, have maybe fast and slow options, and just to be able to counter what your opponent might be able to do. So that was quite a lot. I know it was quite a lot. But in the next video, what we're going to talk about is, in the next team building video, that is, I don't know if it's going to be the exact next thing I do, but in the next video, we're going to talk about what are the specific Pokemon that you need to be able to counter on your team, and not just the specific moves and abilities that you need to be able to counter. And a lot of it's going to come down to Pokemon that benefit from the, like, terrains or abilities or weathers or Fake Outs and things like that, are going to be some of the best Pokemon. And you need to be able to counter Pokemon that can set up or support each other. And so that's what we'll talk about next. But a lot of it does come down to what we just talked about, which is why I think it was important to talk about that first. So with that being said, let's end this super long video. So have a good one, y'all. Until the next vid.